Welcome to Monday, November 4th on Now Next Later. Sasha and I are very excited to have Jay from nCino with us. Jay and Sasha and I were all in Denver for MBA annuals. I'm sure most of you were as well. And so what we figured is we would dive right in since we were all there. We would dive right in on the content today, which is the digital mortgage experience. We've all worked across the digital mortgage experience previously. Jay, you're at nCino working on it right now. And I think what Sasha and I have said a lot on Now Next Later is you can't be in mortgage and not be in digital mortgage anymore. That mortgage is digital mortgage now going forward, but that might be a little bit ambitious on our part. So you tell us, what's your view right now of where we are on the digital mortgage?
Thanks for having me on. It was great seeing you all and, of course, everybody else in Denver. I think diving right in, looking back, all we did is digitize.
I just paused. Sorry.
All the paper. Good?
Yeah, we're back.
So we just digitized all the paper we had. We were not able to, we didn't have the time, 2020 and even a little before, to really look at why do we have all this paper. So we were at a point where we had to take the paper, just digitize it and make it available. And I think as things are settling down, we're asking more questions of, hey, does this really take us to the path of digital where data is going to move across, or are we going to continue just moving the PDFs across, right? So some of the technology we're working on scares me a little bit, where I'm like, I don't know if we want just data extraction from the documents. We want more. We want the data to move back and forth more easily. That's what's going to get us to where we are. But I think we're at a point of digitization. We still have some ways to go digital.
And how are you thinking about this question of, well, if we just digitize, then the process hasn't really changed, to your point? I mean, you just kind of said it there. It's like, hey, we digitized it, but we're still now passing data the same way we passed PDFs. What advice do you give to lenders, and how are you looking at it inside nCino to think about now we have to think about something more than just the same process in a digital world?
Very, very apt. I think the audit trails that we have now started paying a little more attention to, they have existed. Servicers now that are inheriting some of these loans that were closed digitally and digitized manner, electronically, are starting to pay attention to the audit trail. And I think the audit trail is going to be the key to launch the next steps, because it has all the data that we've ever wanted. It has Sasha signed a loan. It shows Sasha went through the process down through the nanosecond. When did she stop at which document? How long did she take to review this document? So now you're finally getting the bigger picture of what was Sasha's behavior when she went in as a borrower and actually closed the loan. So the audit trail provides so much information where I am not sure where, along with, moving digitized to going to digital, that we are going to have that much paper involved. And that will truly allow us to move some of the data, because we'll be able to rely on some of these audit trails and say, does Sasha really need to review this here? Can she review it at post-closing? What needs to happen? We'll be able to look at the process. And I think that audit trail that shows when Sasha signed in, when Sasha reviewed a doc, when Sasha signed a doc, when it was sent back and forth, it has so much good information on it that the reliance on what's happening overall at closing is becoming more apparent. And that's what's going to leapfrog us a little more forward. Yeah, and I also think title companies are going to start relying on that audit trail that shows them, hey, a closing did occur. How did it occur? You're going to stop trying to, scan PDFs back and forth. You're going to rely more on the data that's available through these solutions.
Yeah, I think the question that the audit trail and the vendor partners, service provider partners brings up, for me is, how do you recommend, or how are you telling lenders to think about the review of those milestones, the review of that metadata that you point to, we now have access to see it all. And I wonder, because on Now Next Later, we talk a lot about like the roadmap or the path to innovation, to change, to adoption. How do you recommend lenders start looking at that? Because I think it can be a little overwhelming at first, but it's the key if you're going to make any types of efficiency changes, if you're going to trust technology, if you're going to save time and money. And so, do you rely on your service providers? Do you do that in house? How do you recommend lenders even
So,
start to
um,
unpack that?
you know, when audit trails have always been there, right? We finally started seeing these requests, which I was waiting for. So we had already put, you have your e-consent. You would already have that available in your LOS. And we'd already worked on it. I know other vendors did too, because we realized that is the audit trails started becoming available in the LOS. And then when these loans were moving, right, it takes some time. It's this growth that occurs. You close a loan, you sell it, it starts moving to a servicer, it starts getting transferred back and forth, and people are looking for that, where did this change start? And you
Mhm.
started seeing, then I was like, oh, finally, people are asking, hey, can my downstream trading partner is asking for the audit trail. Was I supposed to have that? Yep, it's already sitting in your LOS. It's in this e-folder. It's here, it's here. So you started seeing this ask, demand for it. And then the focus shifted a little for us to say, how do you make this, enhance this even better? Do we need to just show system user? Do you need to show the user? So you start reviewing one of the most important documents in that entire stack of your closing documents, and you start realizing, wow, there is a lot of information that people could use here. How do I enhance this document? Where all do I make it available? Because the downstream investor or the downstream servicer may not have access to your LOS. They may
Mhm.
not have access to, nCino. They're not going to be customers. So how do they retrieve everything? Take it down. You could move it over internally. You'll always have your LOS. You start thinking about, how am I putting this package together that I used to get in FedEx, now electronically moving it forward. That's the excitement, honestly, Jeremy and Sasha, that I'm seeing with lenders. That's like, wow, you're actually asking for the details that originally mattered with this, because closing is three parts, right? You have pre-closing. We have a really good way for Jeremy, your loan. You need to review your docs. You have an at closing process where all of this magic occurs. And now finally the curtain's going up little by little on post-closing, and people are like, well, we kind of need to automate something here too, because here is where all the information gets verified. Sasha, I see you shaking your head because you've probably heard it. Hearing it is, let's raise these curtains up a little. Same way, we couldn't just raise post-closing curtains. We had to raise a little bit of the secondary market curtains and be like, you know what, your promissory note is moving around electronically. You may want to pay a little more attention to the closing behaviors versus just thinking about where you're going to sell this. This is a better process for everybody across the board. So I think it'll start at these, I call it the metadata available with these solutions. I think people are going to start paying more attention to it.
Yeah, I'm shaking my head because having worked, I know we were joking before the call started, all three of us have either previously or currently worked at a closing solutions company. I know nCino obviously does far more than just that. But having worked at a closing company before for technology, I constantly heard the post-close team feel like the redheaded stepchild, right? And it makes sense because everyone wants the sale, right? And so we're so focused on get the loan through, get it closed, get the sale, and we don't always pay attention to the downstream impact once that loan has closed and now it has to be sold and it goes out into the market. When it comes back for curative issues, that's when the post-close team is normally working at it in multiple people, multiple ways, and it becomes very convoluted and they feel like not a lot of technology has been created to support their process. So I love what you're saying, and I know Jeremy and I are probably both having the same thought that we should rename this podcast something about data, because it has literally started and been all about data every single session we have. But there have to be smarter ways for us to capture and leverage, harvest, assimilate, use that data from, to your point, pre-app, closing, all the way through post-closing. Is there anything that you're actively working on at nCino that you can share or tease at all in that space?
A lot. I think we need to have another session to discuss, get feedback, get comments, mostly around how do you process improve, workflow improve without the need to constantly be in and out of systems. We found that you lose people, you lose the connection, the interaction when you're moving in and out of various systems. The moment you want to step out, so we find, some folks just want to stay in Encompass. They want all their workflows in Encompass. That's where they stay. That's where they maximize their, you've probably heard this, right? An average person spending their day in front of a computer it's about 6.25 hours is where you're going to maximize. Rest is you're going to have breaks, you're going to have other meetings and all, but your main focus is that time, and they want to stay in Encompass. Others want to stay in another solution. So it's how do you improve workflows for the people where they are? So formerly we had said, meet borrowers where they are, but I think it's meet back office teams where they are, whether they're in the pre-closing, closing, or post-closing phase. So that's, I think that's one of the active pieces, and we've heard it, working on it, improving it for a long time.
I like putting notes and thoughts in the chat along the way for everybody listening and for when this recording goes up. And one of the things I'm kind of mulling over in this step of the process for a lot of our listeners and a lot of lenders is you have this question of why that comes up. And it's different, I've noticed, for each part of the organization, meaning the value that post-closing gets, to Sasha's point, is a different why than the value that closing gets, than the value of clear to close gets, than the value capital markets gets from having a digital asset and data integrity that they can deliver. And I struggled with it a lot at Stavvy because I felt like I was stacking sort of 5 different individuals' incentives and then trying to sell it as like this, I don't even know how to think of it, like an incentive like a cheeseburger, like an incentive Big Mac. You get this and you get this and you get this, and it all stacked up. But it was confusing because we didn't have a champion that really said, we're doing this. And then kind of went from there. Can you talk a little bit about what you're hearing in the industry coming back from MBA Annual, also just in your role, digital mortgage and industry, thought leadership, everything you do, Jay? What are you hearing from lenders that overcome that and to make sure that, hey, we're all in this together and we're actually going to deploy this because this is what the data is telling us. This is, where cost has now become one of the biggest drivers of decisions we've had. What's your take on the next step of the industry for this?
2 thoughts from my perspective, right? My personal view on this. For the lenders that are very successful doing this, you had a head start. You didn't start at COVID. You started 2018, 2019. So the way you went about the incentives for these different departments within the organization, right? Everything for bigger organizations, your portfolio, your program, and your project management things. You started the project. You kind of, when you program managed it, you added, now we say hybrid, you added the electronic notes. Some folks were doing electronic notes from way back when, right? So the success for those folks was the steps in the ladder, which worked, right? So you took each step, you were able to weigh the pros and cons. For the people that are starting now, I think a little bit, this is my second observation you think you have to play catch up. So you're kind of trying to move it all together. The roles that those individual companies had who started 2018, 19 didn't even have formal roles in an organization to do this, right? They just were able to, because they were doing such small numbers, they were able to just add it in. The individuals that are doing it now, the lenders, it's overwhelming. You cannot, our industry doesn't move till you have mandates. Okay, that's we all know that. I'm sure you all talk about it too. There's no mandate. There are mandates for other things. I think you're going to always focus on that, right? So there isn't anything to create that incentive internally other than actually put a fear of my job's going to go away. So where is the incentive for somebody to do it? And that's where a little bit what I've started thinking and, processing on my own is, I think the vendors are going to get to a point where this becomes bigger than the vendor trying to explain it. This is going to be when you truly say, what are all the areas that save the borrower money? Can we move the, costs in a manner where they're spread out, where we can pass savings on to the borrower? I have a few close friends in the industry. We've always talked about, hey, whatever happened to our initial goal of when the savings come of $200 to $400 from this, some of it has to get passed down. For those lenders that sit in that second bucket, I have tried to count many times. I always come up with this number roughly of 35 loans. You're going to struggle through 35 loans before you could get this whole process down. You don't have individual roles. You don't have product management. You don't have program management. You don't have portfolio management roles that say, we work on this technology. So you're going to have to be very careful, very determined, and close about 35 loans. So in that second half of group that I see, the people that close 35 loans in the first 2 months, boom, they're straight into, now you're talking thousands. The ones that struggled to close those first 35 loans over a period of 6 months, nope, it's starting all over again. It's like, you can't try to ride a bike and say, I'm going to learn it over the course of the year. You practice over the course of the year, but at some point, that hero behind you is going to have to let go and you're on your own. So do it fast because everything is fresh. That's what I see, Jeremy. Overall, I think you have to go ahead, you have to close the loans. It can't be, I'm going to use it just for my borrower that's in Japan and, I'll figure out everything else. It has to be your standard process. Yeah, and I think most people succeed. That's why we're here talking about it. It hasn't died. Nobody came back after COVID and after 2023, even with the down market, and said, I'm moving back to paper, right? That didn't happen. So we're definitely moving forward.
I do think some struggled or failed with implementation, though. And I think part of that is a result of, to your earlier points, not necessarily having a good, and Jeremy too, holistic strategy and plan in place. I'm mindful and feel for how many times in any given day, week, at any given conference, I hear lenders, particularly mid-size and smaller, stand up and say, it's me. It's a one person. I have to ingest all the change that's coming into my organization and come up with a plan on how to deploy it. And I'm a one trick pony, so to speak, in a way. Like I can't do it all myself, and yet I'm being asked to do it all myself. And to your point, Jay, they're going to go with what's mandated first because they don't have a choice. And so these other things that are somewhat optional are going to get pushed down the totem pole because they have a restraint on resources. And I find that this is an area where technology companies have an opportunity to do more and offer more. And I know that puts pressure on us to come up with either consultative approach or additional tools, or, I remember at SnapDocs, us working with Encompass admins to create rules to help determine the eligibility of a loan from an e-perspective, right? There's all sorts of creative ways we can do that, but I do think it's a call to action for tech partners to step up and continue to try and find ways to do more to lessen the burden on the lenders, because they are going to continue to face more. And right now, there's many that have closed their doors and will continue to close their doors if they can't ingest this change at a appropriate time and scale appropriately as well.
So we have two.
And go ahead, Jeremy.
Sorry, go ahead, Jay. No, I was going to say, off of Sasha's comments, we've got two kind of questions coming in that are on our list to talk about anyway. Like Lindsay Meyer makes a great point, Jay, and this goes off of what Sasha was just saying. How do service providers, particularly title, help lenders? How do technology companies help lenders? Because my view of title has always been, title knows each and every system, because title serves a bunch of different lenders, and each lender has their own preferences. Use this, log into this. You go to a typical title company who's serving a multi-state region, they've got their different workflows, different standard operating procedures, different logins for all the different systems. So if anybody's seeing digital mortgage from the other side, it's title. They know how to do it. They're just waiting for a lender to tell us which, when, why, when, how you want to do it, because we, the title company, usually get it. What recommendations do you have to help for title to help you push forward into lenders this wave of what Sasha was just referring to?
So I would say first we have to all acknowledge that the biggest burden of everything falls on title. Sitting at the end, and this, TRID, a lot of it fell, and I'm just like, oh my God, look at this repeat of, we just expected that they'll know everything. I ran a title, or, started from ground up for in another life title, printed the binders, read title. There's a lot going on. Title is process. So what we think is, I'm going to send you the closing docs. You're going to do some magic, and the loan's going to close. You're going to fund it. Boom, you're done. That's 10 minutes. What else do you have to do? So there isn't any acknowledgement of how much work goes in title. And I think one of the biggest burdens we have put on title is this multi-medium type of closing. Oh, this one loan is all paper. This one loan is hybrid plus paper. So, context switching for title, we're going to have to start being a little more mindful of it. I think the two things that I've learned and taken back is, when you're building technology, what kind of cognitive load are you putting on the end user? Can they digest it? Can they move from what they were doing? And one of our end users, Sasha, we talked about back office. I think title is back office. So what I would say is, for the title companies, there are a few that really are looking at saying, we do electronic closings. There's a company in Seattle that's just straight out said, they're like, we are Seattle. We don't touch paper. We're going to do electronic closing. So I think if title companies could encourage, every lender has the solution. I think all three of us would agree. There isn't 95% of initial docs are signed online. I doubt, hybrid is just, now it's the norm, right? It just takes off. I think for title companies I would say two things is, ask the lender if you can close electronically, and what aspect of the loan can you close electronically. At least move to, just like lenders are like, we're closing 90% of our loans hybrid, at least title companies need to get there. Nobody's ever going to deny a loan to a borrower who cannot sign electronically. That's not what anybody's proposing. That will not happen. I personally obviously would not be supporting any of that. But if title companies can ask, which part of the loan can we close electronically? How do we get, this is the most important piece, how do we get the documents back to you electronically? I think those two questions, how do I stop mailing it to you or emailing the package back to you? Does the system that you have a way where I can send the docs back electronically? So those are two things for title. I also saw a comment from Janelle. I think she's my partner in crime here, all our partner in crime. She heavily, guides, and she's been doing it probably a little longer than me, is do it. You have to do this, because nobody's going back to paper, and you want to leave your mark on something. The amount of time you've been in the industry is close a loan electronically. The joy, the post closers that jump up and down is pretty incredible. So yeah, what was the other question? I missed the second question there, Jeremy.
So well, I didn't throw it out yet. Alan, thank you, Alan, for listening each week and tuning in. We really appreciate that, and the comments. And, the IT departments, the technology folks at lenders are getting smaller over the last market cycle. And so Alan had talked to one CTO in Denver who essentially shrunk their team from 38 to 9. So you're looking at, pretty dramatic 75% reduction there. One of the things that should confirm is what Sasha, I think you were saying, which is this should be seen as an opportunity. Service providers, technology companies, vendors are always asking us, like, how do I get in with lenders? How do I land bigger deals? How do I become a true partner? And then here's this opportunity for digital mortgage sitting there. This is it. This is the way you do it. Take
all up your sleeves.
That's right. And we know, like, one of the things I say all the time is there's a pretty solid path to success in any industry, making experts more expert. In other words, your lender's good at what your lender's good at. Their marketing organizations, their sales organizations, their referral recipients. And then to Jay's point, the closers typically have been there forever. They know how to do this. They are expert at this thing. So what are you doing to make the lenders experts more expert? And I think thinking about it that way then allows you to carve out the space to say, hey, I'm good at this. Whether, Jay, to your point, Ron, iPen, whatever it is, I think of it as saying, like, hey, here's what we are expert at. You don't have to learn it. You don't have to do it. I'll do it. because I'm the expert at that, and start to really kind of define those responsibilities. And then technology should take care of the rest. Like when you talk about that data push and pull, isn't that the bridge to letting everybody do what they're best at?
It is. I think what you're leaning on in simple terms is how do we daisy chain everything together now? Are we at that point where the technology exists, the guardrails exist, the lenders are all here? So now what's that catalyst that says, I'm going to daisy chain this entire process for you, and let's digest all this before we even start talking about what's coming next. You talked about data, Sasha. Yeah, that's all. That's what's coming. But I don't think we'll get to data the way we need to utilize it. It's not, one data set. It's a lot of data to do one mortgage that you have to consume, and that won't come from paper. So if anybody wants loan programs to succeed, based on everything else that we don't even have the time to touch on, you have to move to an electronic version of it. Move at least to the digitized version. You will be ready for when the digital comes. If you're still doing paper, and that to that comment about the IT teams, that is across the board. This tech spend at lender organizations is this big. At successful ones, it's this big. The ones that say we are a tech company doing mortgages, if you know what I mean, they're always more successful, versus saying, I want to do mortgages, but I'm going to grab what tech I can. It's like saying, I have my iPhone, but I want to still do maps on paper. I want to book. I have the app, I want to use a smartphone. I want to use it for just texting, but I'm going to, call my kids. No, Life 360, all of these things. You want an improved life from the technology, you're going to have to take the entire robustness of what that technology offers. But yeah, I think tech spend is this big, but I'm hoping it's temporary. I watched that dwindle, but I think it's temporary. You're going to find people are like, there's just too many of us in there touting about how good tech is, for tech spend to stay low.
One other item I holistically, sorry, Jeremy, to interrupt you, that we need to push as an industry is there still are certain instances where digital can't be accepted from an eClose perspective, whether it's hybrid, an eClose with an eNote or fully withdrawn. And, maybe more complicated at the county level, but at minimum with sellers and servicers, we should holistically as an industry be pushing on them to figure out how to fully accept. I've worked with clients where I've seen them do both, like do an eClose, but then still mail a package because of a requirement from a servicer. And I'm just mind boggled by the fact that we can't seem to get over that hurdle. And I think there, again, some are going to be more challenging than others, like the county register area. But I think with sellers and servicers, there's an opportunity for us holistically as an industry to continue to push on them to find ways to accept.
I think it'll improve.
Yeah, I think don't use it as an excuse to not, we're at critical mass, but you're right. There's going to be some places that have to be in-person electronic. You could still be digital. You just have to do it in person. And I think you're right, most of it there. We'll have 2 minutes here, Jay, for the last word. Can you tell us what your take is now that we've kind of broken out all these tasks that have to happen, verification of identity, verification of eligibility for digital, all the things we're moving towards that we mentioned earlier are, competitive pressure to deliver here. Where are we in terms of what's later? How close are we to that fully digital experience where you swipe, confirm your identity, and pick a closing date?
I think much closer than we think. I think what took 20 years to get to this point is not going to take 20 more. I think even within the industry, the acceptance of, this is how it was done, so we need to do it is very low. People are exhausted. So I think it's going to be very fast where you're going to see improvements in RON and IPEN. You mentioned that. I think over the next 2 years, the whole notary alignment is going to get better. So it'll be IPEN and RON that will take over with some of these other elements. I think you are going to see tap a card, swipe right, because your verification of who you are after you've identified who you are is going to be oversimplified. And I think we're going to pick that technology from other industries that are already using it. So we historically have built some of our own tech, but we've also adopted some, like our mobile piece from nCino, right? It's an app. We didn't invent the app. Apps exist, so we are able to put it out there. So there's going to be technology advancements we will keep using, but I think we'll be very closer to swipe a card or swipe, get a mortgage than we know so far.
Well, on that note, thank you so much, Jay. We're definitely going to have you back on Now Next Later. Sasha will continue this conversation as we always do next week. Thank you so much for being here, Jay.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.